Welcome to the Journal Podcast from the Chartered Insurance Institute, a place for thought-provoking discussion from the world of insurance. I'm Tim Groves, Professional Communities and Engagement Manager. This podcast is part of the CII's Mental Health and Wellbeing Month and is a follow-up to a webinar called Food for Mood and Motivation with expert Anna Reddy. We will be revisiting some of the key themes from the webinar and picking up some of the questions that came through from the attendees. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. And the webinar you did went really, really well. So it's great now that we can catch up and maybe with a bit of follow-up in a podcast with some of the questions that came through and maybe explore some of the topics a little bit further. But I thought it'd be really nice to start with finding out a little bit more about what it was that originally got you into, or what got you interested in the food and mood and mental health as well. That would be great to hear from you first.
Yeah, definitely. And for a long, long time, I think I've said this on all my webinars, I've always been fascinated by health and well-being. And probably the first pillar of it that I got really fascinated in was exercise. And as a child, I realised that I had to get rid of some of that energy in some kind of way. And probably it was a little bit different to what most people, thought of exercise at that time. I was into running quite early and even aerobics at a really young age when it wasn't the normal thing to do. So I carried that through my life because it's always made me feel really, really good. But probably what I didn't realise, and this is a real gap really in terms of knowledge, if you got to the professional level, you'd have dietitians, nutritionists around you to support you. So how do you feel for that exercise? Whereas if you're just really into your fitness, we didn't, or for a long, long time, we have more information now, but didn't always have that information about how do you actually fuel for that sport. And that was probably an area that I wasn't getting quite right. I was training well, but probably not feeling well. Also, it was a time when low fat was the way to go and everyone jumped on these different thoughts around what we should be doing for our nutrition. And it was when I started to try for my first child and really struggled and went to see a gynecologist. And he simply said to me, go home and eat fish and chips. That was his advice. Well, I know that eating loads of junk makes me feel rubbish. Okay, we've got to enjoy our life. Life's got to be a balance. It's not about never eating anything that's junk. But I was a bit like, if I don't want to just go and eat fish and chips every day, that doesn't make me feel good. And I was a bit shocked that really a gynecologist in that position had said that as well. So I started to go into a bit more of a journey around what I could do to fuel myself better and how actually, you can get more of the nutrients in your diet that you need rather than just going to fish and chips as he told me to. And realise that some of those missing pieces were just making sure that you're really fueling your sport by enough protein and all these different kind of things. And it was just a real eye-opener as to the information that people aren't empowered with. And people always focus on the bodily image. And I just really think we need to reframe it and think about your mental health first. That comes first. And then indirectly, all the other things slot into place. And equally at that stage as well, I did get diagnosed with osteopenia, which is the stage before osteoporosis when your bones are starting to thin. Fortunately, it is reversible. Osteoporosis isn't reversible, but osteopenia is the stage before which is reversible. So I was determined that I was going to reverse that. And again, my advice from the doctor when he diagnosed me with osteopenia was, are you eating enough greens? Yeah, I am, yeah. Maybe you need to go running and do a bit of exercise. Well, I was doing all those things. But again, they're not taught in medical school around nutrition. I think things are changing a little bit now, but for years and years, there was no knowledge around nutrition, movement, sleep during that medical training. So that advice that I was given, I was already doing, but there was definitely something that wasn't working. So I guess it's like lots of things that start that passion is that you have your own experience and then you go on a journey to get the answers. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer to that question, but I hope it gives you a bit of insight as to why I am so passionate about why we do really focus on how we feel well, but also think about your mental health as well, because that impacts on so many areas of your physical health.
No, I think that's great answer, great insight. And I must admit, myself and probably many people who are listening, I felt a bit confused over the last few years about this is the great new superfood. And then a few months later, it's like, oh, actually, too much of it is bad for you. And you can understand why people give up because it's hard to make sense of it. So it's great that you're trying to attack that. And again, that point you said about doctors actually spend only about a day in their whole training of, whatever 5-6 years or whatever they spend at medical college actually on nutrition, which I think is changing now, starting to, but it's still a slow trend. Okay, great. Well, listen, I've got a load of questions that have come from our webinar last week. So I'm going to work my way through them and to see where the conversation goes. So one question that came was, how does what you eat at breakfast affect your mood and focus later in the day?
Well, I think this is real individual and understanding yourself, but everything has a chain reaction. And again, I go into this in my webinars. It's not always about following everything that's the latest trend and being really, really strict. It's just thinking about the small little things that are going to have a ripple effect. So, for instance, if you start your day with a really, really sugary cereal or something that isn't nutrient dense, full of protein, fiber, but is really, really highly processed, you might feel okay straight away, but then within an hour or two, that energy's going to dip and you're going to lose focus. You're probably going to start getting hungry and wanting more snacks. And if you've had something highly processed and your palate needs really, really tasty things all the time, full of sugar and salt, that's what you're going to want again. And then it just has a ripple effect. So before you know it, you're probably going to be going for an unhealthy snack that's going to be just a quick energy boost. You're probably going to feel a bit tired when you have those dips in energy. So you're probably going to be having more and more caffeine, which again, nothing is bad in small doses, but it's that snowball effect that it has. So probably you've got less clarity during the day at work. You're not as focused. So actually you're not getting as much done. And then probably over the course of the day, you're getting behind with your work. You're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling stressed. Because you feel emotional, you probably go for quick fixes in terms of your food and your whatever you're drinking. So it's just really thinking, could I just have had a breakfast that was maybe a little bit more higher in protein? It was going to maintain those blood sugar levels. It was quite nutrient dense. It gave me a really good start to the day so that then the trajectory of that day could be completely different than if I had a really, really highly processed breakfast. So it's just really thinking about those small things. And actually, sometimes it's planning in advance and just having a mental note of that. This is what I think I'm going to have for my breakfast, because this could actually change the whole trajectory of my day. If you start well, you continue well.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, it leads you into the next question quite well. Which nutrients play the most significant role in supporting a stable energy and mood throughout the day?
Yeah, well, there's lots of nutrients that are involved. And I always say to people, prioritize the nutrients that are going to be really beneficial and really going to fuel you well all day. And indirectly, you have less of the things that you don't need. And we know from data that an approach goal is far more successful than an avoidance goal. So rather than thinking, I'm not having this, I'm not having that, start to think about what you can include. So I would always recommend making sure that you're having enough protein, because it not only gives you that great sense of satiety and fullness, it fuels your whole body really. And it plays a key role in terms of all the neurons in your brain and supporting your brain health as well. And then in terms of your fibre as well, and I always think, we should really, really try and include enough fibre. It's recommended in the UK that we get 30 grams of fibre a day. Currently we're getting around about 18. And a lot of that is down to the highly processed food that breaks down all those fibres in food so that our body doesn't need to digest it as much. And when you're not digesting things as much, it goes quicker through your system and doesn't create that sense of satiety. But in terms of a key role that fibre plays is in your gut health. And we know that there's a bilateral connection between your brain and your gut. And I always quote this, and I know we did in the webinar, but your brain's 2% of your body weight, but consumes 20% of your calories. So we've really got to focus on fueling your brain. And all those little microbes in your gut that impact on your brain as well love to be fed off this fibre. So you've got two types of fibre. There's insoluble and soluble fibre. So soluble fibre would be things like your oats that can soak things up. And your insoluble fibre is a bit like a brush that moves things through your gut as well. So they both play a key role, but are important in terms of feeding those probiotics in your gut. So that's probably your prebiotics, but thinking about your probiotics as well, try and think about fermented foods as well that can really fuel your gut and support that brain health as well. So protein, fibre, always think about your good carbohydrates. We don't have to cut carbohydrates out. I know they're demonised. I know some people feel better from not having carbohydrates, but there's a lot of nutrients in some of those carbohydrates. It's better just to go for those in the whole form that are unprocessed. So for whole grains, going for brown rice, going for wholemeal pasta, lentils, things like that are in a whole form rather than those things that are highly processed as well. So those are protein, fiber, unprocessed, low GI carbohydrate. And then, as I alluded to in my introduction, we don't underestimate the importance of healthy fats, and they were demonized for years and years, in particular omega-3s, which you find in oily fish, high in that DPA and EPA. So if you don't eat fish, maybe you're vegan or just don't like oily fish, that's something that you might consider supplementing in. But it's important to make sure they contain that EPA and DHA, because the other form, which is ALA, which is found in like nuts and seeds like that, isn't as readily available in the body. It takes a longer process to be activated. So those would be, the 4 things that I would really think prioritize. And then think about you, think about your world, think about what are you maybe lacking. But food should always be the starting point and the priority, really.
That's great. And actually, I'm going to now jump a few questions, because there's an ideal question to ask you right now, which is, how much influence does gut health have on our mental well-being?
Oh, okay. So we've kind of touched on that really, haven't we? But nearly 95% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. It's a little bit different to the serotonin in the brain as well. But lots of other hormones are produced in the gut as well, which impact on our brain health. So it's important that you're making sure that it's a really good place, that gut, to be getting those messages to your brain as well. So as I said, make sure that you are getting a good source of the prebiotics and probiotics. Probiotics are those good live soldiers that fight things off in your gut, and even link it to lots of different things. If you don't have a good healthy gut, you can't fight off disease or your inflammation as well. And if we've got poor immunity and we get ill, that impacts on our mental health as well. There's so many links. It's not just a clear answer, really. There's so many links into this as well. So making sure that you're getting a good source of probiotics as well. And there's so much more information coming out about the gut-brain axis, and the vagus nerve is the one that transfers those signals between the gut and the brain.
It's really interesting. Actually, there is another question just linked to that, and you have touched on it a little bit. But I'm quite interested because I do notice this myself. The question is there a link between digestive discomfort and feelings of irritability and fatigue? Now, I notice that sometimes when my stomach isn't good, it affects everything. My whole mood, concentration, my focus, and just motivation generally. So is there a link between irritability and fatigue and digestive discomfort? Or?
Well, absolutely, yeah. In terms of that discomfort, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because you need lots of your fibre to really support your gut and fuel your gut. But actually, if you don't eat any right now, I wouldn't recommend going and just having loads and loads of fibre because you've just heard that you need fibre. It's something that you have to work on gradually and build that up gradually so that your gut can tolerate that. And if you've been eating loads and loads of processed food for a long, long time, you could have been creating damage in that gut. So you just need to really start to build it up slowly. Otherwise, you can get very bloated. So then you could get that discomfort from having too much. So I would really recommend, if you are getting that discomfort, to just try and build it up very, very slowly. But yeah, in answer to your question, if you've got any discomfort anywhere, it impacts on your health, doesn't it? And that's why it's important to try and create that consistent, good environment in your gut.
Yeah, and that's a really important message for everyone. I think I'll just reiterate what you said then. They wake up one morning thinking, right, I'm going to try and improve my health. And one of the first things they do is read how good fibre is, and then eat too much. And then all of a sudden you end up feeling a bit rubbish because of it. So that's really, really good to hear that actually that you want to do it slowly and gradually, especially if it's something quite new to your diet. So if you take one thing away, that's a really interesting one. Thank you. A question here about blood sugar spikes and crashes and how they influence how we feel emotionally as well as physically.
Yeah, it is something that I've always believed in, is going a low GI carbohydrate diet. Try and make sure those blood sugar levels are really stable. And eating lots of processed things, lots of sugar can peak those blood sugar levels. And that as soon as you've had something quite sugary, you feel like you've got lots of energy, but very soon after that, you have a real dip in your mood. And also, it's a precursor to developing things like type 2 diabetes. If you're constantly having that peak and trough in your blood sugar levels, you really are putting stress on your pancreas all the time to produce that insulin in response to the sugars that you're eating. And equally, if that insulin function starts to reduce and you lose that insulin sensitivity, then there can be more sugar looming in your blood, which is probably going to the wrong place, which is probably clogging things up, so things in your brain, so that you can't think as clearly, you can't function as well. So the real goal is to try and maintain a really stable level with your blood sugars and to kind of manipulate that as well. Eating protein and fibre and healthy fats in your diet slow down that digestion. And to your point earlier, Tim, as well, around having discomfort in your gut, often that can be because you're eating lots and lots of really palatable food that's digesting really, really quickly and going too fast through your system or even clogging your system up as well. So I'd really recommend making sure that inclusive approach, again, that you're including protein, fibre, healthy fats in your meals so that you're maintaining that stable level of blood sugars as well.
I've personally noticed I'm someone who's very, very obvious. So if I take my daughter to cinema, which we do quite regularly, we'll have a bag of minstrels or something or some ice cream. And I've noticed that I get really, really tired after about 20, 25 minutes. And the amount of times my daughter's had to nudge me to sort of say, Dad, you fell asleep. And I swear it's the sugar. But I know other people who will eat just as much sugar as I do, but it doesn't affect them quite as much. But I assume it's probably still putting their body under pressure, even if it doesn't have that physical tiredness as much as I do. It's just got me thinking, though, have you tried that yourself? Have you monitored your own sugar levels? And would you recommend them as something for people to try?
Do you know, I haven't actually monitored my own, but I have done a lot of work with one of the leading companies who provide for CGMs. And I think they have a place in terms of empowering people as to your individual responses to different types of food. With everything, though, you can manipulate things. So you could have a bag of Haribo's and then you could have a block of butter with that as well. That would probably stabilise your blood sugar levels. Is that healthy? Is that nutritious? Probably not. So I think we've just got to be really mindful with everything. And it's like every single diet. You could manipulate it in some way, couldn't you, to be nutritious or not to be nutritious. So that's why I really think, focusing on the nutrient density of food is a better marker. But having said that, it's all about empowering yourself with information. So if you can see from your CGM, this is what, I had a big bag of donuts and then this is how I felt after, and this is what it was doing to my blood sugar levels. It's that visual thing which also can empower you and give you the motivation to take action sometimes and just be a little bit more mindful of your choices.
I'm someone I like to have something that I can look at and make sense of, actually. So there might be people that it might work for. There's a question here about the role that hydration plays in both mood and energy levels.
Massive. We need hydration. We need to hydrate our brain, otherwise we can't think clearly. And interestingly, often we don't realise that we're becoming dehydrated until we are extremely dehydrated. So that's something that we don't always get those cues that we need. So I would really recommend having that water or something hydrating in front of you, because I said, we don't always get the cues that we need until we are really dehydrated, or just even making simple habits. So I always have a glass of water before I have a meal, and I've done that for years and years and years. So don't even think about it. But if that's something maybe that you take away from today, just try having a glass of water before your meal, because sometimes we misinterpret those hunger signals with needing hydration as well. And sometimes we can think we're hungry when actually we sometimes just need a drink. But some people might think, well, I don't like water and struggle to get hydration. So you can also think about your food as well. And this is something we often overlook. But things like soups and low-processed cereal that you put in milk in as well, it all adds and contributes to your hydration during the day. Things like tea and coffee as well, though, you have to be a little bit mindful, because a couple of cups can be classed as hydrating. But after that, they become more of a diuretic and start to reduce your hydration. And then there's a lot of talk around electrolytes at the moment, which is really interesting. So we can actually have too much. It doesn't sound like it can be too true, but you could have too much water if you're not having enough electrolytes in there as well, because it's all about getting that balance. And it's also thinking about how much you actually sweat and how much fluid are you losing. Are you actually getting that fluid back in, and you're compensating for if you've been training, if you've been exercising? And then I think this brings me on to my other point as well around alcohol. That is a dehydration. So you probably need to be thinking about getting extra hydration in there as well.
For a little while now, I've been having an electrolyte drink the morning after if I have been out for a few drinks, and it does help, actually. This is an interesting question because I've read quite a few times over the last few years about portion sizes of foods since the 70s, 80s, they've got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know whether it's maybe the American influence, American restaurants coming over fast food, that's all about supersizing. And there's a question here about, is there a relationship between portion size and how full up we are with our emotions after a meal? Can that have an effect?
Well, I guess, again, going back to that snowball effect, if you feel sluggish, you don't move, you feel lethargic. So it does have ripple effects. And if you're eating late at night as well, which is often when people indulge, isn't it, late at night, that can impair your sleep as well. And we did the Rest Recovery Charge webinar last week. Sleep massively impacts on your mental health. So if you're not sleeping well because your body's in that stage of still trying to digest all that food, then that's going to impact on your sleep quality, which is going to impact on your mental health as well. So I think in terms of the portion size, if your stomach just gets used to what you have, and I think sometimes it's just having that reset and actually having a bit of a check-in as to, do I really need this? Does my body really, really need this amount? But we're in a world where it's very hard to resist, isn't it? Because everything's available and everything's normalised in terms of the size of food portions. So I think, we've just got to be a little bit more wise in terms of what do we actually need and what are food companies trying to tell us we actually need.
Okay, and this might link in quite nicely to the next question actually, which is about supplements. So a few people have asked about what supplements should I take. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on them, and should people actually be able to get everything they need from food, or are there supplements which are actually maybe things we can't necessarily get from our food or we're short of in our diet? What are your thoughts and recommendations?
Dr. Rangan Chatterjee describes it as an insurance policy, which is quite a good way of describing it, isn't it? If you're going to be rushing around and you're not going to have time to get those nutrients in, and yet you might want to supplement. The only thing to think about with your supplementation is that it's not as highly regulated as maybe like the pharmaceutical world. So you just have to be a little bit careful around the reputability of where you're getting them from. And do try to get it from your food. Don't think, well, it's fine, I'm taking supplement, I can eat whatever I want, which is actually what some people might think, is that if I'm taking a vitamin, then I've got a free rein just to have loads of highly processed things because I'm taking this multivitamin that's going to counteract it. Just try to go at it with a double-edged sword. Prioritise your food and then add in with supplements that you think, well, maybe I'm not getting this from my diet. And maybe, if you are adopting like a vegan or a very restricted diet, it's not possible to get all the nutrients that you need, but there might be certain ones that you need to supplement as well. So as I said, try to think about what's maybe missing in your diet. And these are lots of foods that you don't particularly like that high in particular nutrients that you might supplement with. But I would always prioritise food.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And this is interesting as well, which I know people often, comfort eating. We reach for something that gives us a little boost. Maybe it could be alcohol. Sometimes it's unhealthy food choices. And then we feel guilty. So then that affects our mood and our energy. Have you got any tips for people who maybe currently reach for unhealthy things when they need a bit of a boost?
Yeah, it can be a really vicious circle, can't it? And I think we've just got to put common sense behind it, really. People talk about willpower. Willpower is nonsense, really. You've got to think, if there's something there that you're going to go to if you feel stressed, just move it, put it somewhere else. Make an obstacle course to whatever you go to if you're going to emotionally eat. And life is a roller coaster. People who think that you're going to be happy 24/7 and life should be a bed of roses need probably a bit of a reality check, because we're all human. Our emotions change all the time. So who knows when you're going to have that emotional response during the day? Who knows when someone's going to send you that email that absolutely riles you? Who knows when there's going to be a hurdle put in the way? We don't know. But what we can do is make sure that those responses that we go to, so maybe those really unhealthy responses, we can just make it harder to be able to access them. And I know, again, I quoted this in the Rest Recovery Charge webinar, but Viktor Frankl says between stimulus and response, there is space. So how do we broaden that space? And that space is about making that obstacle to the unhealthy things, but also going back to that prioritization is making a prompt to what could actually improve your response. So, thinking about what actually can I do when I've got this stressful email down, or someone's riled me, or someone's giving me road rage. What can I actually do that's actually going to help me, that's going to calm me down and put me in a better emotional state. So, even by maybe having something that's quite nutritious at the front of your cupboards, or maybe having a quick app that you go to on your phone that just like a calm app or something that just prompts you to tackle it in a more positive way, that again, it's going to have a greater snowball effect during the day.
No, that's great. Sometimes you can feel really motivated and other times not. And I can't always explain why am I feeling more motivated on eating better right now, but sometimes it can just happen without trying. But I remember cutting out sugar a few years ago, and I did it for about 3 or 4 months. And before then I was doing a lot of exercise, going to the gym. I think it was during the pandemic, actually. Yeah. So I couldn't really go to the gym. I wasn't really feeling great enough to go out and do that much exercise either. Because I cut out sugar, it's the first time, despite doing less exercise and less gym work, I lost weight. And, being a man and you have the love handles and it's real difficult to shift. And it was amazing. And I couldn't believe how sweet food started to taste as well. Other things that didn't have sugar in them. It was quite amazing.
You are right. You can retrain your palate, and sugar is addictive because the more you have, then the more you need as well. And you just kind of change your taste buds, don't you? And you only need to cut it out for a certain amount of time. And then you don't really miss those things. So it's just trying to do it for so long, isn't it? And I know I used to always give up sweets for Lent. And then at the end, you get to Easter Sunday when you could have loads of sweets. And I'm like, I'm not really that bothered now. You become a bit desensitized to things.
No, definitely. Yeah. I think I said it between sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks to create a new habit. So once you've gone past that, the addiction has probably reduced for that sugars. So during the food and mood webinar that you did, somebody asked this question about, life's really, really busy, don't really have time to meal prep, but also finds cooking quite intimidating. So most of the TV shows, it's all very fancy, it's all very technical, not kind of things you could easily do at home. So the question was, do you think there's value in showing people that simple food and shared meals can be just as beneficial for mood and well-being? And also, is it something that you've thought about doing yourself? I don't know whether you have or you do, but it looks like maybe there's a bit of a gap, or unless you can point this person in the right direction of how can she maybe learn to cook simple food that is healthy?
Okay, I have to disclose now, I am not a very good cook, but I am not because, like you're describing there, I get frustrated with really, really fancy things. And the more you complicate things, the more difficult you make things, then the less you adhere to things as well. It's all about simplifying things. So I would really recommend, think about maybe 4 or 5 things that you particularly like that are really highly nutritious. So think about what you actually like now, and then ChatGPT it, Google it. What can I make out of these 5 things? And come up with some different ideas. And then maybe just build on 1 or 2 recipes to start off with that have like 4 or 5 things in that are really easy, relatively cheap, but highly nutritious. And then the more you make something, the easier it becomes, doesn't it? It becomes habit, and just start to build upon that. But absolutely, you could get really bogged down with needing zillions of ingredients, and you just don't. You just need to think about what you actually like, what's particularly nutritious, and then, chat GPT. Or even if you do your order online, make sure you're adding stuff in there, and then they can give you suggestions around what recipes you can make really, really easily, and making them in bulk as well. And I'm not talking about making lots of little Tupperware boxes and all that kind of palaver. I'm just talking about make it simple, think ahead. Lots of things you can do in a slow cooker, which is really easy. Air fryers speed things up a lot now as well. So just try and make it easy and accessible, but making sure that it's nutritious and not overcomplicating things.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that person will be listening to this podcast and they can play around with ChatGPT. I think I've used it a couple of times where I've said, I've got this in my cupboard or my fridge. Can you come up with something healthy? And actually it's pretty clever and it gives you instructions and to follow along. So it's definitely a good tool. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much at time now and we've got through quite a few questions there. So thank you so much. There's been some really useful information there. And obviously next week, I believe we're going to be getting together as a follow-up podcast to your rest, recovery and recharge webinar as well, which are all available still on demand. So people can still watch those. So thank you so much, Anna. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you over the last few weeks. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. It's been really great to chat today on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Journal Podcast. You can find useful links in the show notes and related articles on the Journal website, along with further podcasts. This has been part of our Mental Health and Wellbeing Month, and we have many more webinars and resources that you might have missed, and also some more coming up. So please follow us on LinkedIn and check out the CII Wellbeing Hub so you can join us for further sessions. And also please like, review and subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.